everyone. Welcome to the status conference for dockets number 2015-0389 and 2017-352. Thank you to everyone for being here today. My name is Jay Griffin. I'm the chair of the Hawaii PUC. Joined here also by my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Jennifer Potter, Commissioner Leo Suncian, as well as a number of our staff. Give you a very quick overview of our status conference today. We're going to address 4 different topics that were laid out in the Commission's October 2020 Notice of Status Conference. Topic number 1 is the current status of Phase 1 CBRE projects and impacts of the interconnection process on project costs and timelines. Topic number 2, proposed delays in Stage 1 renewable RFP projects resulting from Hawaiian Electric's interconnection requirement studies. Topic number 3, Hawaiian Electric's future plans to replace Stage 2 RFP projects that have withdrawn during the negotiation of their power purchase agreements. Topic number 4, Hawaiian Electric's explanation of information disclosed to the self-build team in Phase 2 of the CBRE program. Commission understands that there may be confidential information underlying some of these topics, or requests that Hawaiian Electric discuss the topics in a way that provides the Commission's participants with relevant information without needing to address the substance of any confidential information. Commission also notes that this morning, Hawaiian Electric filed some information under seal in the 2 subject dockets, along with justification table for the confidential reactions. Commission is in the process of reviewing that information and the justifications, and we'll let Hawaiian Electric know if it has any concerns about the redactions that may necessitate refiling the information. So a little bit about our format this afternoon. Commission's hosting this status conference through the WebEx for the docket parties, but is live streaming for the public and stakeholders via our live YouTube site. The link is provided in both the relevant dockets. The public will be able to view the status conference, but will not be able to provide or post comments during the status conference. But we do always open to receive those comments through various different channels. Commission is recording the status conference, and the recording will be available on our website and incorporated into the docket records. We've allocated the beginning of the status conference for Hawaiian Electric to address the aforementioned topics. We're going to ask that we run through your entire presentation first, and then we'll follow along. We'll follow up with questions by each topic, if that makes sense. But please proceed through your entire presentation so we can use that as the base of material for foundation. The remainder of the status conference will be reserved for questions from Commission staff, commissioners, and discussion of our next steps. And so with that, turn it over to the Hawaiian Electric team for your presentation on each of the topics. Thanks to all of you. I know this is done on short notice, so we appreciate the responsiveness and look forward to a productive discussion this afternoon. I'll turn it over now, mute myself. So for Greg and Becca, please take over.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, and Commission staff. We appreciate this opportunity to share with you today more information about the pending projects identified in the notice of this status conference. Let me begin by emphasizing that all the pending projects are important to us, as they are important to our customers and our system. We are absolutely committed to bringing these projects and other projects online as soon as possible. What all of us are doing is hard. The deadlines are aggressive. It's been said many times, but it's worth repeating. What we have accomplished so far and what we intend to do within the next 5 years puts us among the world leaders in the transition from fossil fuel to renewable resources. This pandemic has disrupted everything, but you won't hear us use that as an excuse today for the reason why projects may not be moving as quickly as we would all like. Hawaiian Electric is still moving forward with the work that we can control. We talk to developers nearly every day, and if they're confronted by pandemic-related delays, we have committed to doing everything we can on our end to keep moving ahead. We want to state clearly that we do not anticipate any changes to our retirement plans for the AES Hawaii coal plant. We will walk you through that later today. We are getting a lot done. the amount of projects and the novel issues that we have addressed is unprecedented. In the last 3 years, we have run over 9 RFPs for renewable energy and grid services. We currently have 21 new projects in various phases, including contract negotiations, PUC approval, and development. In addition, there are several CBRE projects in development and grid service projects before the Commission for approval. There's been a surge in customer-sited solar projects, up 6% over last year, and we've streamlined our processes so those systems can get up and running faster. Soon we'll be instituting 8 new RFPs through our CBRE program to bring even more renewable energy to our grids and provide options for our customers. These are significant accomplishments for Hawaii and for our customers, and it is important to note that none of these projects are off the rack. There is no standard project. Each one requires precise individual tailoring to ensure it fits perfectly. We are learning as we go, and one thing that we've learned is there are no shortcuts if we want to ensure a project is successful. Each project requires a lot of time and a lot of people. We are doing this all under very aggressive schedules at a time when nothing is status quo, and there is very little room to adjust. While we have improved many parts of the process, including shortening our RFP durations, increasing the speed of contract negotiations, and improving community outreach, we recognize that the interconnection process should be continuously improved. Not all of the issues within this process are within the company's control, but we get it. That's why about 6 months ago, we began to take another look at how we could improve the interconnection process. The company looked at other jurisdictions' interconnection processes, discussed with our IGP consultants, and took feedback from developers on ways to improve. An internal team developed numerous options based on this feedback for further review and study. Ultimately, we decided on a pilot process whereby the companies would take on the cost and work for completion of all company-owned interconnection facilities. This is a significant change to our current process. So this pilot is currently only being proposed as part of our low to moderate income RFPs as part of the CBRE docket. We believe that this pilot, along with other improvements we are making, will reduce the amount of time required to reach each agreement on interconnection, specifications, and costs. We'll be providing more details on these improvements today and tell you how we believe they will save time. We're here today to answer your questions and to emphasize that we're getting the job done. We're adapting to the new normal of the pandemic. We're looking at our own processes and fixing what needs improvement. We are committed to accelerating this renewable energy transition in a way that's safe, reliable, and cost-effective. Today, I have several team members with me. Some of the information requested was confidential, and as noted by the chair, we've tried to provide responses to such questions in advance for the Commission's review. I will now turn the presentation over to Lani Shinsato and Mark Wong to discuss the first topic on the Commission's agenda regarding the status of the Phase 1 CBRE projects. Thank you again for inviting us to meet with you today.
Thank you, Becca. My name is Mark Wong. I am the manager for the Commercial and Community Programs in the Hawaiian Electric Customer Energy Resources Division. As Becca said, I'll take you through an update on the Phase 1 CBRE projects and discuss the interconnection process. Greg, if you could progress to the next slide, please. Thank you. So over the next 2 slides, I'll provide some detail around where we're at on each of the CBRE Phase 1 projects. In this table, you can see a summary of the 7 projects that are active currently. I've included the project size and the estimated completion date. The estimated completion date for the purposes of this discussion is being defined as when subscribers will receive bill credits. So if the project is submarked as a 2, that's a company estimate of the completion date. And if it's marked a 3, it's the subscriber organization's estimate. And where there's both a 2 and a 3, we are in agreement. The other notation is that for projects that have signed a standard form contract and interconnection agreement, we are sharing the names of those subscriber organizations as they will be publicly announced in our CBRE portal shortly. So the first project that we have that we expect to go online in phase 1 is on Maui, and it's a 25.75 kilowatt project called ROYS. And we expect that to be online, issuing bill credits on December 1st. And we're going to go through in a little more detail on the next slide of where we're at more specifically with that project. The next project is estimated in the next quarter in 2021, and that's the Mililani Tech Park project. Following that, also in 2021, we have a project in Molokai that we've planned for first quarter as well. And then we have two slightly larger projects, Hawaii Island project number 1 and 3, that is expected to go in the third quarter of next year. And then back to Oahu, we have two projects, a 3 megawatt and a 1.72 megawatt project that we expect to go online in the middle of 2022. Greg, if you could progress to the next slide, please. So this gives a little more detail on each of the projects discussed on the milestones that have been completed, where we're at, and I'll discuss what needs to be done and things that the companies and the subscriber organizations have been doing to expedite these projects. At this point, all the application reviews have been completed. And starting with the ROYS project, we have the testing and metering is in progress. So we're currently working with the subscriber organization to install that meter and then the subsequent testing that follows. And we hope to conclude that in November so that we can go in with the December 1st commercial operations date. And then the Mililani Tech Park project up at the top has just started construction activities, and we're working very closely with the subscriber organization on that. Part of the theme is for Hawaiian Electric to be very responsive to questions and to work with the subscriber organization to get some visibility on the schedule and next steps so that we can overcome any roadblocks that might occur. But Mililani Tech Park is right now in the subscriber organization scope to complete construction activities. And then going down below, Oahu Project 2 and 3, we have just issued the facility studies for those projects. The Oahu Project number 2 was issued last week, and then the Oahu Project number 3 facility study was issued a week prior. And we are awaiting feedback from the subscriber organizations on those cost estimates and schedule. The next project to cover is under Molokai, project number 1. This one is in the IRS stage, and we did have a pause in the IRS for this project because of concerns with the interconnection costs. We since worked with the subscriber organization, and a new interconnection point was identified, and an opportunity was found to lower those costs. So once those estimates were shared, the IRS was subsequently restarted on September 16th, and we expect the report to be completed on November 20th of this year. And then the Hawaii Island projects have completed their IRS studies. I'll note for the islands, excluding Oahu, they have a slightly different process, and so a facility study was not conducted for those locations, but instead incorporated into a simplified IRS process for those locations. So the results of the first Hawaii Island project are with the subscriber organization, and with Hawaii Island project number 3, we are in the process of signing contracts and expect that to be completed by the end of the week. Greg, if you could progress to the next slide, please. So as mentioned, we have a number of responses that were filed in a letter this morning. And in regards to question B with the withdrawn projects, more details are in that filing letter, but I think I can say that 2 projects were withdrawn in phase 1 at the subscriber organization's request. On topic 1C, timelines and costs for the interconnection studies is further detailed in the response, but I will talk to it at a higher level on the next slide, as well as the timelines and costs for the interconnection facilities. Greg, if you could progress to the next slide, please. So for the purposes of this status conference, we wanted to share what we've identified as the main drivers for the CBRE phase 1 interconnection timelines. And as you'll see in the filings, which contains further details, we did have extended periods of time that elapsed primarily on Oahu with the interconnection requirement studies and subsequently the facility studies. And the company's position through this period of time was we prioritized project viability. So we worked extensively with subscriber organizations who had a number of proposals for lower cost interconnection options that were at times inconsistent with the company's current standards for interconnection. But we wanted to work with the subscriber organizations and work internally through many different areas in the company to open up and get opportunities for CBRE, because if we're successful in lowering the interconnection costs, we feel that we can help improve the project financials, which result in better benefits for subscribers. But we also have to maintain a balance and make sure that we ensure a safe and reliable interconnection to the grid. So that was the balance that we struck, and a contributing factor where we exchanged time for improved costs for subscriber organizations and prioritizing project viability. But secondly, we encountered delays just in the normal back and forth. These interconnections are challenging. No one interconnection is the same, and it requires a lot of special attention. And as a result, many of the equipment designs were changed throughout the application process, and many times that required reevaluation on the company and the subscriber organization's part. And we did encounter delays when, for example, we had waited for an extended period of time for modeling data from one of the subscriber organizations. And we also had non-technical or non-interconnection related factors, such as financial concerns and concerns with meeting deadlines that were discussed in the phase 2 order to be online prior to the start of tranche 2. So I think we were able to work through those uncertainties, and through this process, we identified a number of lessons learned that we'll discuss further in this. Example is the LMI RFP, so that Hawaiian Electric can handle more of the interconnection issues and cost and through a pilot program. And also, we identified in our filing for phase 2 opportunities to reduce the interconnection requirement studies for small projects so they don't have to be done at all or can be done quicker. And we've worked to create standardizations with clear requirements, such as standardized single line diagrams, which make it easier for subscriber organizations to produce and for the companies to process. And in addition to this, many of the CBRE issues, as they're identified, we have teams set up so that we can be responsive as quickly as possible. We escalate issues even to our executives so that they're aware, and then we can drive as a company to expedite any of the concerns or issues so that do not remain roadblock. So thank you for your attention. Those are all the items I have for the phase 1 at this time, and I'd like to turn it back over to Becca so that we may go over the topic 2 slide. Thank you.
Mark. So in this section, we'll cover the stage 1 RFP projects and the interconnection process for those projects. We'll cover all of the stage 1 projects with changes in guaranteed commercial operation dates as requested by the Commission, and will specifically cover Hoahana Solar and AES Kuhialani projects. This topic has a bit more, there's more information requests from the Commission regarding this topic, and so we'll spend a little bit more time on topic 2 than we will the other 3 topics today. Some of this information is confidential and was included in our filing this morning, but we will endeavor to ensure that we talk about this as fully and possibly as we can today without getting into those confidential specifics. Next slide, Greg. So there are various reasons that the guaranteed commercial operations dates, or I may sometimes refer to them as GCODs, for the projects in stage 1 have been pushed back. This was actually contemplated as part of the PPA negotiations, in fact, for all of the stage 1 projects. And they all included a provision in their PPAs that stated that the GCODs could potentially be moved based on the results of the IRS. As the IRS details the requirements for interconnecting to the grid, it is difficult to pin down prior to the completion of that study an exact commercial operations date. That's especially when dealing with the aggressive timelines for completion that were part of the RFP. In addition, with while the guaranteed commercial operations dates have been extended for several of the stage 1 projects, we have endeavored to the extent possible to keep those dates within the year 2022. And as you'll recall, the stage 1 RFP required that projects be online within that timeframe. Also, as noted in the introduction, even with these known changes in the guaranteed commercial operation dates for stage 1, the companies remain committed to the success of each of the stage 1 projects, and we do not anticipate that any of these currently known delays will have any impact on our plans to retire the AES Hawaii coal plant. At a high level, before we jump into the causes for the extensions to the guaranteed commercial operations dates, I thought it might be helpful to give a brief explanation of exactly what the interconnection requirement study process is with regards to our utility scale renewable energy projects. The IRS is made up of 2 main studies. The first one is the system impact study, and the second is known as the facility study. The system impact study requires developers to provide 3 different models of their equipment. Once those are obtained, the company and our consultants work together to do a model checkout and ensure that the models are in good working order. The quality of the model is really critical to the results of the system impact study, and by extension, the reliability of our system. Only once we get these models in good working order can we complete the system impact study. The system impact study also includes a portion of the study which is known as a group study. That means that all the projects selected in that RFP for that island are studied at the same time. So a delay in receiving these models for one project could result in a delay in studies for all projects on that island. This study is looking to ensure that projects can interconnect safely and reliably to the system and may identify mitigations to ensure that the projects can operate on the grid in a reliable manner. These mitigations may include either technical solutions that need to be implemented with the facility or interconnection facilities, or operational changes to the way the facility operates. The facility study, the second piece of the interconnection requirement study, develops the cost and schedule for the scope of the company-owned interconnection facilities. It incorporates the results of the system impact study. So while it can be started similar to the time the system impact study is started, it can't be completed until after the system impact study is finished. Therefore, delays in the system impact study necessarily result in delays in the facility study. Once both projects are completed, we then negotiate a PPA amendment to incorporate the results of the IRS into the power purchase agreement. We refer to this as the IRS amendment. The IRS amendments are filed with the Commission for informational purposes. Hopefully that was some helpful background, and with that, we can now discuss the extensions of the guaranteed commercial operation dates for our Stage 1 RFP projects. These extensions occurred for a variety of reasons, and in many cases were project-specific. But however, probably the largest reason for delays was the length of time it took to receive accurate models from developers to begin the system impact study as part of the interconnection process. We will discuss this in more detail on the next slide. In addition, every Stage 1 project, which is not uncommon even outside of these projects, has requested at least one equipment change to either help reduce the cost or take advantage of the latest technology. This occurred either during or after completion of the system impact study. In some cases, developers requested multiple equipment changes. The system impact study requires us to study the models of the exact inverter and best technology being used for the facility to ensure that the project can be incorporated safely and to ensure the reliable and safe operation of our systems. When developers change equipment, this results in the need for restudies or a reduced scope depending on the equipment change. The new equipment has to demonstrate that it's equal or better performance to the original equipment. Depending on when these requests may have been made by the developer, it either caused delays to the original IRS while we were waiting for the updated models, or may have caused restudy work to be done at the back end of the project. In some cases, after completion of the interconnection requirement study, there were disagreements between the companies and the developers with regards to required interconnection specifications and technologies. In these cases, we worked extensively with the developers to address their concerns and make sure that they fully understood the requirements of our system and the results of the studies. This was further complicated in stage 1 because, if you'll recall, in our RFPs for stage 1, we gave developers the option to either have the developer build the company-owned interconnection facilities or the company build such company-owned interconnection facilities at the developer's cost. The developers were allowed to make this decision at the completion of the IRS process. This necessitated that every facility study for the project for each stage 1 project had to include 2 options, the developer build option and the company build option, and the developer and the company had to meet and discuss both options before the developer could make their decision. This process took approximately 2 months longer than originally anticipated by the companies. In other cases, changes in project design and footprint were made to address community concerns, which resulted in the need to either delay certain portions or redo certain portions of the IRS or the IRS amendment for the PPA. With regards to the 2 projects that have not yet completed their IRS amendment, the companies do anticipate extensions of the GCODs for such projects, but we are still working with the developers on these amendments and do not yet have the exact dates. With regards to the Ho'ohana Solar Project, changes have been made to the project to revise its location to urban zone land. In addition, this project had to overcome challenges when the inverter manufacturer for the project unexpectedly went out of business, leading to the need for a complete redesign of the project. These equipment changes and relocation of the interconnection facilities resulted in changes to the models during the initial model checkout and validation phase of the IRS, resulting in some delays in this process. However, the change in the location of the facilities off of agricultural A-land was in response to community concerns, and the companies appreciate the developers' willingness to meet with and address the community's concerns and believe that a delay for such change was in the best interest of the overall success of the project. In addition, the companies explained in response to PUC HECO IR 15 filed on October 9, 2020 and docket number 2018-0431, and again in the written response filed today with regards to this IR from the Commission, that more time was required to reach a mutually beneficial agreement with Ho'ohana Solar to build a switching station that would enable the interconnection of multiple future renewable projects in the same area. This includes potentially 2 projects from our Stage 2 RFP. This relocation has several benefits to the companies and to our customers. First, it results in a more robust and reliable interconnection for critical resources through interconnection to multiple 138 kV lines. The original interconnection only contemplated interconnection to 138 kV lines. Second, if other projects interconnect here, it will avoid having multiple switching stations in a relatively close area to each other. This is not only suboptimal from a cost perspective, but it also presents system protection coordination issues where the system will lose the ability to clear faults efficiently. Third, this allows future projects, as I mentioned, in addition to potentially Stage 2 projects, but also other future renewables in the area to interconnect here and should reduce the interconnection costs and time for those projects. It also means a reduced footprint associated with interconnection facilities preserving aesthetics and also land for other uses in this area. Things that we know are very important to the community. We continue to work with Koahana Solar to refine these plans, and we will file a more precise guaranteed commercial operations date once the IRS amendment is completed. With regards to the AES Kuhialani project, this project has also experienced delays, some of which were again in an effort to address community concerns raised about the project. Again, the companies are appreciative of such efforts of the developers and believe that such a delay is more likely to lead to the overall success of the project. As noted in PUC MECO IR 12 filed on October 9, 2020, and again in the response to this IR filed with the Commission this morning, we note that AES Kuhialani notified Maui Electric of its plans to reconfigure the project layout on July 29, 2020. Prior to this notification, the companies had planned to execute the IRS amendment on July 31, 2020. This reconfiguration, while responsive to community concerns, has resulted in the need to recomplete certain interconnection study work for the facility before an IRS amendment can be completed. Also, I just want to pause here and note that if you're hearing background noise, I greatly apologize. It's pouring down rain all of a sudden here in my location. The companies anticipate filing the IRS amendment with the Commission for the Kuhialani property project by the end of this year, and once completed, we will be able to provide an updated GCOD for the project. I will now turn it over to Mark Asano, who will provide further information regarding the Stage 1 projects and delays in the IRS process.
Thank you, Becca. So on this slide here, we're showing some representative schedules of the Stage 1 IRSs, as well as currently what's going on with the Stage 2 system impact studies. So on the top diagram there, there are 4 different colors. The golden color is the estimated schedule and the baseline that we had allotted for models to be submitted. And then in the gray shaded areas represent the model checkout and validation period. And then the green areas is the time to conduct the system impact analysis, looking at steady state issues, protection issues, as well as system stability. And then finally in the yellow is where the allotted time to develop the final report. As noted earlier by Becca, the model validation and checkout process took substantially longer than the companies had anticipated. During this phase, we took the approach of not letting the perfect get in the way of the good. It took in some cases up to 10 to 11 months to get good models to be able to minimally run the system impact study. To mitigate further delays during the model validation process, some of the non-essential model issues were tabled for further investigation after the Stage 1 system impact study. Such issues need to be further reviewed during restudies, inclusive of addressing remaining model issues and review of generic models of multiple projects after the Stage 1 system impact studies. As Becca noted, that there are 3 models that are used during this process for system impact studies. One for short circuit analysis, one for steady state and stability analysis, and another model for electromagnetic transient analysis. Of those models, there are major components to each model that include the plant design, the PV inverters, the battery inverters, and the plant controllers. Typically, a developer will use a system integrator to develop a plant controller that coordinates all of the various pieces of equipment behind the point of interconnection. Companies and their consultants have met virtually in real time with teams across the globe. Through these meetings, equipment manufacturers will often need to modify or add capabilities that are required. And this takes time. On average, 7 to 9 model iterations were needed. Models are not off the shelf, and each inverter manufacturer and plant controller have different ways of accomplishing performance requirements. The model tasks are technically challenging for everyone. Models must be an accurate representation of the facility and its operation. System integrators take the models of various components and integrate them all to represent the facility behavior in compliance with the dispatchable performance requirements described in the PPA. The developer and its team of consultants need to understand how they plan to run the facility. Since these are complex projects, developers often have not thought this far ahead during the preparation of their proposals. This becomes a challenge when modeling because this often leads to iterations in the models. If uncertainties exist, however, the companies may need to make assumptions, but this may lead to restudies once the uncertainties are clarified and the model is modified. I'll now discuss a little bit about where we are with the stage 2 IRSs. So, as recognized through the challenges we encountered through the stage 1 model checkout and validation process, we made some adjustments to stage 2 to have more rigorous timelines so that developers put focus and effort into model development prior to and immediately upon selection. We provided developers more prescriptive guidelines for model submittal and review guideline and documentation, so that developers could inform their manufacturers and of the model requirements during the review process. We have seen, as shown in the gray bars, that there has been improvement in developers being able to develop the grid following models. Model submissions improved from stage 1, particularly from developers that participated in stage 1 or utilized experienced system integrators. A few of the new developers in stage 2 still had some challenges with producing validated and complete models. Another feature of stage 2 is grid forming inverters. Again, this is another area where the companies are leading the way in these types of applications. Grid forming inverters used in the way that the companies are envisioning to use them introduces new complexities and functionality that require more interaction with developers and equipment manufacturers. Some of the grid following model development may continue through the end of 2020. Greg, you can advance the slide. So now I'll take a few moments to discuss some improvements that we've made from the stage 1 process. So in addition to the improvements that I just mentioned with regards to model checkout and validation, as part of the stage 2 RFP, we also pre-identified sites for project development, as well as identified substations that were available for interconnection. As part of the stage 2 process, these 2 improvements seem to have helped in streamlining some of the challenges encountered in stage 1. And as Mark Wong mentioned earlier at the top of the meeting, we are also looking at the LMI CBRE RFPs, where we proposed the company paying for the interconnection as had been suggested by stakeholders through the IGP process. This would mean less cost risk to developers when preparing their bids, which may also lead to better competition and pricing and streamlining the facility study process. On the next slide, I'll now respond to the Commission's question regarding potential reliability impacts due to the delays with the retirement of the AES coal plant. As Becca noted at the introduction of this meeting, we currently do not anticipate any reliability issues with the end of the AES coal plant. Additionally, all of the Oahu stage 1 projects, most of which are expected to be in service by the end of 2022, the stage 2 projects, as well as the CBRE and current DER programs and grid services under contract, are being counted on to provide energy and battery capacity contributions to effectively replace the energy and capacity that is currently provided by AES. The Kapolei Energy Storage Project is an important project and remains one of our highest priorities. Other things that we are looking at in terms of mitigating any impacts to delays is reviewing our maintenance schedules to be able to adjust for any days where we may have carry low reserves. And the next slide. Now I'll respond to the Commission's question regarding customer costs and greenhouse gas impacts. The benefits are not lost, but delayed by the amount of, customer benefits are not lost through the delay of the stage 1 projects. Rather, the amount of time, they are just delayed by the amount of time the GCOD is pushed back. As previously discussed, there was a trade-off in benefits as some delays in GCOD created alternative or other benefits, and it also ensured the success of project versus losing the project entirely. Any delay in projects would also generally mean an extension of benefits at the back end of the projects, the term of the project over the course of the PPA. We are focused on completing the projects as quickly as possible and mitigating any delays to the greatest extent possible. Okay, and then next slide. Okay, now I'll briefly discuss on all the efforts that we are making to mitigate any project delays, many of which Becca had previously discussed. So in terms of the stage 1 projects, we are conducting early engineering with developers prior to the completion of restudies and in some cases IRS amendments. These parallel efforts are intended to minimize risk while compressing the schedule. We are also allowing the developers to build company-owned interconnection facilities, and we are keeping in constant communication with the developers' project teams. Looking forward, the company tried to incorporate many of the lessons learned from stage 1. And as part of the stage 2 process, we have tried to make various improvements. As stated earlier, we provided developers more rigorous model milestones and validation guidelines so that developers can get a head start on model checkout. Although we have not completely been able to stick to the original schedule, we are seeing improvements in the timelines for model validation as compared to stage 1. We again will pursue early engineering. Additionally, we are conducting preliminary facility studies in parallel to the system impact study. The facility studies will be finalized after the completion of the system impact study. And with that, I will now turn it back to Becca to discuss topic 3.
Thank you, Mark. As Mark mentioned, we'll now discuss topic 3, which relates to the company's plans to replace the projects that have withdrawn from the stage 2 RFP process. Again, as with the first 2 topics, certain information related to this topic 3 is considered confidential information that we cannot discuss here today, but we filed responses with the Commission under protective order. However, we'll do our best to be as responsive as possible this afternoon to address this topic. Next slide, please. 4 projects withdrew from the stage 2 RFP process. Each withdrawal was the developer's choice and was motivated by different considerations of those individual developers. On Oahu, 2 small projects, Kaukona Hua and Mehana Solar, withdrew from the process. These projects were approximately 6.5 megawatts each. Given the small size of these projects, compared to the relative size of the overall Oahu portfolio of projects selected, and other considerations that we included in our confidential response this morning, the companies have chosen not to replace such projects at this time. This will allow the companies to focus on the remaining larger projects and work towards a successful outcome for each. Maui and Hawaii Island are a bit different, and there are more options available to consider. The companies are still evaluating their options and are in discussions with the independent observers for each of these islands, but we can share the following information here with you today. On Maui, one project, Kamaole Solar, voluntarily withdrew from the Stage 2 process. The developer is considering a potential sale of this project, which would require the purchasing entity to be agreeable to the project pricing, facility performance, and negotiated terms of the PPA. However, there is no guarantee that the outcome of their efforts will be successful, and as of today, the developer remains in the position of having withdrawn from the negotiations. The company and the developer have laid out necessary steps of a possible sale, but the companies are not involved in any sale discussions. If the developer does decide not to sell the project, we will need to further evaluate whether or not we will take additional steps to replace that project. On Hawaii Island, one project, Waikoloa Village Solar, withdrew its project. Section 4.8 of the RFP provides several options for how to address the removal or withdrawal of a project. Included among these options is the ability to replace a project with another project from the priority list, or just moving forward with a smaller final award group. At this time, the company's proposed path is to move forward with the selection of a replacement project. However, we continue to evaluate all the options permitted pursuant to the RFP and are currently in discussions with the independent observer regarding next steps. We will update the commission once a decision has been made. We can now move on to discuss our final topic related to the CBRE RFPs and the company's RFP and self-build teams. Next slide, please. There were two inadvertent communications between the CBRE RFP and self-build teams. We'd like to start off by noting that the companies were proactive in handling this issue and self-reported both inadvertent communications. We did the right thing and we raised this issue directly to the independent observer. We ensured that no harm was done to any potential third-party bidders or that such third-party bidders were not put in any sort of disadvantage to the self-build team. We have also taken remedial action, which I will discuss shortly. In short, our process worked. With regards to the specifics, in preparing our draft RFP for the Maui CBRE program, it was determined by the company that we would again offer our Waianae site for potential projects. The companies have previously offered the Waianae site in both our Stage 1 and Stage 2 RFPs. In the company's Stage 2 RFP, we selected a self-build project to build a standalone energy storage system, or BESS, at this location. However, there's still room remaining at the site for a small solar project. The companies wanted to be able to provide as much information as possible regarding the site and possible streamlined interconnection processes for interconnection of any solar facility being and in order to do this, that would involve interconnecting through some of the facilities being developed as part of the Waianae BESS by the self-build team. In two separate communications, members of the RFP team had reached out to the self-build team in an effort to get more information regarding the Waianae site. In the first communication, a member of the RFP team asked the self-build team to mark up a diagram of the Waianae site. This diagram was a public diagram available as part of the company's Stage 2 RFP, and the intent of the request was just to be able to indicate where the final BESS facilities and interconnection facilities for the BESS would exactly be located on the site map. The self-build team immediately recognized that the communication, while not sharing extensive information about the Maui RFP, was not through the proper communication protocols. The self-build team immediately notified the sender that the communication was not following these proper procedures, as well as notified myself and the Hawaiian Electric legal department. The self-build team also took the step to delete the email. The companies evaluated the email and determined that the only possible sharing of information that was not already public was the company's intent to offer the Waianae site in the RFP. We then notified the CBRE independent observer of this email. We also posted on our website that we would be offering the Waianae site for projects to bid so that the independent third-party party bidders would have access to such information in relatively the same time period as the self-build team. In the second communication, a member of the RFP team reached out to the self-build team for similar reasons, to gain more information regarding the self-build plans for the standalone BESS at Waianae. As I mentioned, the company wants to offer an interconnection solution to third parties that desired to bid at this site that would allow interconnection through the BESS facilities. This would allow interconnection at a lower voltage level and make the interconnection for a smaller project more cost-effective and feasible. It would also ensure that additional space would remain in the interconnection facilities for other future projects in the area that may wish to interconnect there. Without this solution, a small project would have to either locate at the distribution point, at a distribution level at a point of interconnection across the street, or interconnect at the 69 kV level, and would take up valuable interconnection space. Each of these options would likely have been prohibitively expensive, and we likely would not have received cost-effective bids for this site. Again, the intent of this communication was not to share confidential information from the RFP to the self-build team, but instead to have the self-build team provide information regarding an existing project. We again raised this issue and communication to the independent observer. In neither instance was there a harm to potential third-party bidders, as the self-build team was not given access to confidential information. In fact, the intent of the communication was to be able to provide more robust and complete information to third-party bidders and to ensure a better outcome for our customers for potential bids at such sites. However, we recognize that there was a breakdown in proper communication protocols. To address these instances and to ensure that communication protocols are followed strictly moving forward, the companies have taken the following remedial actions. The companies had all members of the self-build, RFP, and shared resources teams recertify their receipt and understanding of the Code of Conduct and the Procedures Manual for the CBRE RFPs. As part of this recertification, the companies recirculated both our written and pre-recorded training materials, as well as the Code of Conduct and Procedures Manuals to each of these team members. The companies have also ensured there is a process in place to copy the IO on all communications between the self-build and the RFP team, no matter which side of which team initiates such communication. We also reminded all of our team members that communication should go through the RFP communicated proper channels, either our RFP email inbox or, once the RFPs are up and running, Power Advocate, unless otherwise approved and overseen by the independent observer. Finally, we are working on a virtual interactive training that we plan to roll out shortly. This will allow all team members to be able to get live training and have the chance to interact and ask questions during such training regarding the Code of Conduct and Procedures Manual. Thank you again for inviting us to meet with you today. We are available to answer any questions you may have. As I mentioned, we are committed to ensuring the successful operation of each of these projects and moving forward towards our 100% renewable energy future.
Thank you, Becca, and the whole Hawaiian Electric team for your presentation and your time this afternoon. We're now going to move into our questions by topic. So starting with topic number 1 on the phase one CBRE projects, and starting with commission staff. So any questions there?
Thank you, Chair. This is Dave Parsons with the PUC. On the CBRE topic, I'm wondering if you could explain for these projects what how long each of the steps in the process should take, and how long it actually did take for these projects, similar to how you sort of laid things out for the stage 1 and stage 2 projects. I'm looking at slide 4.
Hey, hang on, I'm just pulling that up now. So for slide 4, as mentioned, the Mililani Tech Park project did not require an IRS. Oahu project number 2, the IRS started on February 19th 2019, and concluded on November 7th, 2019. And then project number 3 on Oahu was from March 25th, 2019, included on October 15th, 2020. And then for Maui, the IRS was from January 9th of this year to April 17th of this year. As mentioned, the Molokai IRS was restarted. It had originally started on October 10th, 2019, and then was subsequently put on hold on December 26th, 2019, and then was restarted on September 16th. And I think I mentioned a target due date of November 20th. And then the Hawaii Islands IRSs was from April 30th, 2019 for the first one, and September 30th concluding, and then July 16th, 2019 to September 27th, 2019. And we do have 150 calendar days at which those IRSs are intended to take. The dates I mentioned, though, they do incorporate receipt of payment, and also, as mentioned with the Molokai one, incorporates any feedback we get from subscriber organizations that may require follow-up.
Just to add to that, and Mark, I don't know if you want to add some more on the some of the reasons why some of those IRSs took longer than expected. I think in the case of the Oahu projects, there was a lot of back and forth between the company and the developer on exactly what type of mitigation would be acceptable to mitigating some of the issues found or identified in the interconnection studies. So that took quite a bit of time, and the responses may not always have been right away. So it took time for, you know, like in some cases for the developers to get back to us on as they sort of did their research on potential mitigations.
Yep, thanks, Mark. Yeah, as mentioned, throughout the IRS process, we did have a lot of questions from the subscriber organizations on alternative solutions and the mitigation options, and that's where through the IRS and even after the IRS, we had extensive meetings with areas, nearly all areas of the company, including our system operations, telecom, substation engineering, and others, to evaluate these sort of proposals and how they impacted the system, more particular to Oahu, but also taking the time to get a sense for the impact in regards to cost and schedule on these. And each of these requests did take time, and also did require subscriber organizations to provide information at other times. As I mentioned, I think on one of my later slides, we had waited for an extended period of time from some of the subscriber organizations on modeling data that we needed to complete the IRS studies.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And Mark, I guess I'm just trying to understand for these projects, which are by and large, you know, very small compared to relative to the stage 1 and stage 2 projects, you know, if there's any difference in the timeline It sounds like there's some variation in, project by project, but overall it sounds like there's significant amount of time required for the studies for these projects, similar to what was needed for the stage 1 projects. Is that fair?
I think that's fair to say that especially for the Oahu larger projects, we, as we mentioned, no project is the same, and it each required unique analysis and evaluation. And it goes to the small projects too, because it is a new program for us, and we did find some opportunities with the small CBRE projects, like mentioned the Middle Atlantic Tech Park, where we're able to avoid an IRS altogether. So we've definitely been trying to take lessons learned and extend them to other projects, including phase 2.
And Dave, I think that's fair to say in terms of what occurred in phase 1, but that's definitely not our goal. We're trying to significantly reduce that time in phase 2. So, as Mark had noted earlier in his presentation, we have, as part of the RFP, issued standardized interconnection designs. We did, the interconnection to the distribution system is a lot simpler than, say, the transmission system. So again, I think the IRSs should be much faster. I think part of the issues were, because the margins are so tight on the CBRE projects, working with the developers on, the minimum required mitigation solutions, that did take some time. And then Mark mentioned there was one case where we did ask for models, which took some time as well.
Okay, yeah, I was hoping that it would be a simpler process overall anyway, just for the small projects and that kind of interaction. But I guess on that, this is sort of the question is, it sounded like there was I think Mark Wong, you mentioned that there was sort of a trade-off between the time required to go through these studies and the project costs, or interconnection costs, and the viability of the projects. And are you just referring to the back and forth about how much what sort of equipment is going to be needed for the interconnection and how much that will cost? I'm trying to understand, how does the time equal reduced cost and improved project viability? What's driving that? And is there any other way to reduce cost, reduce time besides just taking more time? It sounds like what you're saying is that to reduce cost of interconnection, you need to have more discussions. Is there a way for you guys just to come to the developers with project costs that are reasonable and don't need to be, they don't need to negotiate with you on what those facilities need to be? Or are there any other ways to reduce time and cost, both for CBRE?
Yeah, I think we definitely have some opportunities there. In regards to how we are here, we came up with standard interconnection solutions for a reason, because in the past we would have to recreate that on every project, and those standards were put into place. And with CBRE projects, we had subscriber organizations that had additional proposals that were counter and deviated from those standards. And yes, we did take some time to evaluate that. An example may be a communication method that would be counter to the way that our system is currently set up. And although it may have come to a lower cost for that particular project, it would increase the cost overall because the back-end systems would have to be changed to support this new product. So we went through and we did try to find opportunities for reduction, and we did have some success in doing that and lowering the cost comparatively for similar projects. One of the ideas we had, as you had noted, is having a process in place so that we can incorporate suggestions like these, and again, not having to meet with every single area in the company and evaluate it, but have a process in place that we can more efficiently evaluate these proposals and come up with a decision quicker. So that's something that we are looking into facilitating.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'll hold off on any further questions. Chair, if there's
okay, thank you.
Questions.
Thank you, Dave. We'll now turn to Commissioner Sunsien.
Yes, thanks for the presentation, folks, on topic 1. Just have a couple of confirmation, for my confirmation. Mark Wong, when you mentioned estimated completion date equals the bill credit, does that also equal online? Can I use that term so I can understand it a little better?
Yes, it does. So if we set a December 1st estimated completion date, the project may have actually been online a few weeks earlier. But the way we set up the contract for phase 1 projects is that bill credit wouldn't start until the first of the first month.
Okay.
So we did, yeah.
So it's close, right? It's around that time, when including the estimated dates, right? I mean.
Yep. The facility will be actually producing power prior to that estimated completion date.
Okay. Then I just had a question, and you're on the slide that actually had the question, right? As I relate this slide to the prior slide, right? I look at Mililani Tech Park, and right, assuming they go in this linear fashion to go through the process, right? Yes, right. They're online to come online. What is that? Right, first quarter 2021. But then when I look at the Molokai project, right that's another one that's first quarter, but they're kind of behind what Mililani Tech Park is doing. So is it really linear in fashion that they go through this, or right, is the Molokai project, right, I don't know, lack of a better word, easier, that it's going to get through contract agreements and construction, right, at some faster pace in order to stay kind of in line? If I were to take Mililani Tech Park and Molokai, right, kind of operating on the same timeline, I just want to make sure I understand this particular slide, and I guess it's a little bit of an offshoot on the questions that Dave had on this slide.
Yeah, that's a good question, and part of it is what information that we get from those subscriber organizations. So for Mililani Tech Park, we've progressed to a point, and we've had a number of pre-construction meetings with the subscriber organizations. So we have a pretty good handle for what the next steps are. But in the Molokai project, we have not received a construction project or estimated completion date for some time, and we're in the process of the interconnection requirement study. So for the companies to estimate, we are still awaiting some of the outcomes of that study. So the due date that we have for Molokai is still based on what the subscriber organization has shared with us in an earlier stage. So we simply don't have that information from the subscriber organization as we do with the Mililani Tech Park project.
Okay, my last question, kind of, going off of Dave's last question on the slide, and I think Mark, hopefully you're still there on our side, getting some.
Yeah,
some
apologize.
broadband, some
My
bandwidth
connection
issues.
got dropped.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll pose the question, and if anyone else can answer. But right there, the way I'm seeing it and hearing it, right? It's either, right, in order to get to a standard, say a standard thing that we can tell developers on how to do CBRE project, what is the information needed. We kind of have to give up flexibility, right, for these developers to come up with projects, and that, right, may or may not impact, right, their bottom line and things like that, right. But and knowing that these projects are, or these CBRE projects are probably need the most flexibility, right, because you're dealing with, right, not your typical project, if I could put it in those terms. But is that what I'm hearing? I mean, right, in other words, if these are CBRE projects and we want them online, we're just going to have to face that because they are more flexible, or they are more, right, more complex, if you want to use that term, that we're going to end up with, right, more review, more back and forth, possibly more delays on getting these projects completed and online.
Yeah, apologize. Hopefully you can hear me. But yeah, like we said, each project is unique, and we found that subscriber organizations have different tolerances to what their expectations are on the interconnection cost, and some of these folks may not have had a lot of experience in the market, so I think that has led to some challenges, and really driving the ask for exemptions and alternative technologies. So we have had these standards in for quite a while now, and we've had similar projects that have gone through and have been installed using these standards, and they are serving a purpose to ensure a safe and reliable grid. And so I think that when we have to go and we do get these proposals, we are trying to keep project viability up front, and that's led to the extensive discussions with our internal team, but with the intent that if we can come up with a solution for this particular subscriber organization, it could benefit all subscriber organizations, and we can make it more accessible and available in the program.
Commissioner Ascension, this is Colton. Yes. Maybe if I can just add to the response to your question, and also perhaps give an additional answer to Dave Parsons' earlier question, because I think they're a bit tied to each other. So let me give you an example of a series of back and forth collaborative work between the companies and one of the CBRE projects. For the project, the initial interconnection was to a distribution substation, and to have the facility interconnect through a bay within the substation for a breaker. Like Mark Wong mentioned, part of our effort was to take some time to find ways to bring on the cost of these interconnections down, because these projects are small. They have perhaps a lower tolerance for interconnection costs, right? It's a bigger percentage. And so we listened to the developer. We came up with some responses to move away from a substation interconnection to instead tap to an existing distribution line for the interconnection. We looked at some ideas around using radio devices instead of SCADA to provide necessary monitoring and control of the facility. And for the protection scheme, we looked at options using some newer, different types of communication protocols between breakers that would avoid additional comm lines to have to be built. So those are just some examples of where time was spent to kind of work through these issues that ultimately led to a what we feel is still a very workable interconnection, but one that will be a little bit lower in costs.
Thank you, Colton. That's helpful to know. Chair, I don't have any further questions on this topic.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone from HECO, Colton, Mark, Becca. Appreciate your time today in presenting this information, and then also the memos and documents that you prepared for us in advance of this conference. This is a really heavy conference, actually, isn't it? We have a lot of work going on and a lot of different work streams here. And so this is really important, I think, to all of us. So I appreciate you taking the time and preparing for this. I have just a couple of quick questions on the first topic. One is related to slide 3, so the slide just prior to this one. I'm curious if you can explain to me why the company's estimates for completion are not copacetic or on the same page as those with the subscriber organizations.
Yep, I can take that. So for the ones, the Middle Tech Park project, we said that was a company estimate, and that's fairly in line with what the subscriber organization has. Maybe I should have put a 2 and a 3 there, but for Oahu projects 2 and 3, we did a detailed facility study. So the companies produced a very detailed schedule, like when engineering starting, procurement, all the different activities that happened there. And we did not receive a developer schedule to create that. So we constructed what needed to happen. And so that schedule, as it states in the facility studies, is dependent on the developer meeting that schedule. So that's what's meant by that. We built this using assumptions based on the subscriber organization, and doing that without having the input on their schedules. And that's particularly true also for, I guess in reverse, for the Hawaii Island projects, where we have an initial date that they provide us as early as when they file their application, and we've not received an update, nor we do ask, but the subscriber organizations aren't compelled or not required to provide that information to us. So times we've had to take our best estimate to provide something realistic here.
Okay, thank you for that. So it really just depends on who's preparing that. You and not in all cases, you have not prepared an estimate of when these will be completed. In some cases, only the subscriber organization has done so. Is that correct? And vice versa?
At various stages, like yep. as the Hawaii Island project progresses, and like the Molokai project, as we get through the IRS, we'll have that detail so that we can produce a schedule. But we'll have to work very closely with the subscriber organizations for their input.
Okay. So just looking forward, based on what we've learned from the past year, these projects will have taken from start to finish. At CBRE, we submitted the RFPs, I think right before I came on board at the commission, and I'll be up at 3 and 4 years by the time these are done. Is this what we can expect out of the second round? I realize that some of these are very small. As well, is this sort of kind of, or I know you guys have worked on, I think Becca had mentioned fixing what needs improvement, and then I heard from you later that 6 to 7 months for the IRS and Oahu project, and that was something that you were definitely working to to reconcile or to reduce that timeline. What is this reasonable in your estimates? Have you looked around the industry to see if 3 to 4 years to bring a 250 kW project is on par with what we see in other jurisdictions?
I think that we've seen delays even in other programs, and I think it was we discussed in previous status conferences that we did have a number of projects fail because of, I think a common theme was like site control and other issues like that, and maybe the applications weren't fully ready. I think that this timeline that we've experienced in phase 1 is not to our expectation, and we've tried to work very closely to identify ways to improve that. So taking the subject of site control in phase 2, we've put stronger requirements up front so that we can sort of screen those out and start with a more viable project up front. We've done things as well as asking for construction updates, so down the line we can have some more visibility and control in that. So it's definitely something that we're not happy with in phase 1 either, and I think that's driven us to seek these sort of improvements. And we also mentioned a number of times, but the interconnection process is one that, if you look at these timelines, has taken a long time, and we definitely are working very hard to remove those barriers for future projects. So our intent and our goal is definitely for phase 2 to have a much faster processing and interconnection period.
Great, that's great news. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your responses and your candidness. It's very welcome. Chair, I have no further questions on topic 1.
Thanks, Commissioner. And given the time, I'm going to really hone in on 2 areas. One, Mark, is with this slide. So if we look, I see the good news here. We have 1 project, at least estimated completion within this year. What I heard was that it's not just coming online, but available to subscription. And so is that organization out signing people up right now? I mean, come December, are we going to see people enrolled in this program?
I can say for both projects that the subscriber organization is ready with subscribers.
Have they enrolled people yet?
We're in the process of doing that. Our CBRE portal is live, and we'll provide some more details on that on Wednesday. We have invited the phase 1 subscriber organizations to enroll their subscribers. We are providing training and opportunity for all phase 1 subscriber organizations. So we're in the process of scheduling those.
But we're a month out. You don't know whether they've signed anyone up yet or not.
We've been told that they have.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. You've been told that they have?
Oh, yes, they have identified subscribers for their facility. They have not enrolled them in the online portal yet.
Okay. Any other reasons that could contribute to delay for that project?
For the Roy's project, we're at the stage now where we are getting a schedule for the meter installation. So this is the first CBRE project, and we have worked through some technical issues. I think we've got a path forward, but we're in the final stages now. So we don't anticipate any major risk to deviate from our schedule.
So does that mean, can we take it as a near guarantee that this project will be up and running and possibly people enrolled by the new year?
I think there's a strong chance we will hit that target.
Okay, now let's move to the others. One thing I noticed in the project column under your, with the superscript of 1, so four of these other projects, it notes that project does not yet sign final contracts. So what is that? Commissioner Potter said we're 2 years in, they're 2 years away from completion, and what do we take that they haven't yet signed a final contract yet?
So they have progressed through the process of doing the interconnection requirement study, and then following that, the facility study agreement. So we're following the normal process. The Hawaii Island project number 3 is imminent. It's expected to be signed within the week. The other projects still needs to continue through the process, and we still need the subscriber organizations to approve of the costs for interconnections before we proceed.
So based on the prior experience here, there's some reasonable chance that one or more of these 4 could drop out. If they haven't signed the contract at this point, we've been doing this for years. Are they ready to sign, or are we still going to expect extended discussion?
I don't expect that. We haven't gotten any indication. We've been providing estimates, so the cost shouldn't be a surprise, and we haven't received any indication so far that anyone's serious about dropping out.
Okay. I just want to step back to the macro level as follow up on Commissioner Potter's point. If we do, we have 7 projects left, and I did a rough summary of the project size. These are about 6.25 megawatts total. I went back and looked at the status conference that we held in July 25th, 2019. And at that point, all these projects, this whole process had started 1 year prior, early July 2018. So we're 2 years into it. We may have 1 project by the end of the year, 7 projects, 6.25 megawatts. And for a lot of the rest, it's 12 to 18 months more. Now, Mark, you said a couple of comments that were candid, as the commissioner said, which I agree with. You said that you're not happy with the process. And to the point that there's possibly things novel about this, it would seem like this part of the process is the least novel, in the sense that your company has interconnected dozens and dozens of commercial solar projects, feed-in tariff projects of a similar size. So the commercial aspects of this, I get, they're different, but the actual interconnection seems to be territory that we have been through here in the state and all the islands. So again, you said you're not happy with the process. It's not to your expectation. What is the expectation that we should have going forward? That we're going to see this through to completion, that we're going to see phase 2 far smoother than this. So what you said, you're not happy. What are you and the team doing to fix that process?
So for many of these projects, we've gotten through the tough part of agreeing with the subscriber organization on the interconnection solutions, and that's namely the large projects on Oahu. So we're able to move forward on those. We've also implemented and put into place escalation processes. So I share with our directors, who share with our executives on a frequent basis, where we're at and what risks are with these interconnections and moving them forward. We did have challenges through this, but I think through this process, we've been able to find a lot of solutions, and we have been able to reduce the interconnection costs through it. So we've gained some lessons learned, and we've been able to provide clearer direction to subscriber organizations that are now coming into the same phases that we went through with some of these more challenging projects that we've had. So we're, now at the point where we're nearly signing agreements with these subscriber organizations and then moving into the construction phase. And so what I'm saying is, I think the challenging part about the interconnection process is that we've largely moved past that at this point, and now moving into the next phase.
And Chair,
for
if I could add for, looking to phase two, I do think we made a number improvements in terms of the RFP and standardizing the interconnection. You're right in the sense that we've interconnected similar projects, and I don't think our interconnection requirements are necessarily more than what we've required in the past. And understanding that the subscriber organizations are really, as I said earlier, they have sort of tight margins on what they're able to, allocate funds for. We did look at reducing or streamlining or finding alternate solutions for the interconnection requirements as part of the phase two RFP. So I mean, I'm hopeful that I really am hopeful that as part of phase two that we'll be able to see projects move through more quickly, especially the smaller projects under the tariff. So hopefully, we can show that. And of course, there, I do think everyone is still learning, at least on the commercial side, in terms of recruiting subscribers and things of that sort.
Let me just follow up with 2 points for Mark Posano then. So Mark Wong said that this had not proceeded to our expectation. Also, I'd heard it repeated that we're going to apply the lessons to phase two. Seems like for the timeline on this chart right here, we still have a large part left to phase one. So where are we going to apply these lessons to phase one? And then I sure hope our expectation for phase two, it's not going to take us 2 years to get to this point and 4 years for estimated dates of completion. So what should our expectation be based on the lessons?
So for example, in the, at least in terms of the interconnection for the smaller, tariff projects, we did put in language about the interconnection studies using a reduced timeline. So, for those smaller projects, I think we want to be able to move through those projects much quicker, if they in fact do require, interconnection studies. We have put in a lot of effort as well on the mid-size and larger size projects. With the RFP we did put in standard single line diagrams, which we have not done before. So we're hoping that provides, more clarity to the subscriber organizations so that they can, prepare their bids appropriately. And so, all of those things put together, we're hoping at least the front end interconnection process we can get through, more quickly. I think our goal in terms of interconnection studies, at least for these larger projects, we're always looking at, I think, 150 days or so. And yeah, the RFP is sort of one thing that is different, and we've laid out those timelines than what we did in phase one, which was not an RFP process.
Okay, we have a lot of material to keep covering. I'll just reiterate what Mark Wong said, that he's not happy with the process. Please come back to us and recommend what will improve on that. So we're going to move to topic 2. This has to do with the phase 1 RFP projects, and I'm going to turn it back over to staff for questions.
Okay, I just have, I think, one question. So if you go to the slide, Greg, if you go to the slide with the little Gantt chart for the stage 1 project. So, I mean, it sounds like the biggest contributor to the delay was the model validation. But so we can ask about that, but I'm also curious sort of like what happened after the end of this timeline here, which ends in January. I mean, we didn't see the interconnection amendments until, September, October, perhaps later this year for some of the projects.
Becca, did you want to take that one first? I can start. So upon completion of the system impact studies, there are facility studies that need to take place, and Becca alluded to it in her presentation, where once the facility studies, which include the scope and cost of interconnection facilities, is provided to the developers, there's further back and forth discussion between the companies and the developers at that point.
Mark, that's correct. So this top Gantt chart, Dave doesn't show the facilities studies portion of that work like is shown for the stage 2 IRF. But as I mentioned, there was a lot of back and forth in the stage 1. As I had mentioned, we allowed for the developers to have the 2 options to choose between the company build and developer build, which took a bit longer of time. A, to prepare 2 different options for each developer, but then B, to walk the developers through those and come to agreement. And then also, as I mentioned, some developers made changes to their projects post completion of the system impact study, which required relooking at either the system impact study or the facility study, or small portions of both, or have required making adjustments prior to finalizing the IRS amendment, as is the case, for example, with the AES project that's changed its project siting.
Okay, so how long does it take to do the facility study? Oh, about a month, is that right?
No, the facility study we usually estimate is approximately 3 months.
So it takes approximately 3 to 4 months. It looks, well, 2 to 3 months, it looks like, for the system impact, and another 3 months to do the facility study.
Yeah, if you look at the maybe the top line of the stage 2 representative IRS, we were anticipating that process to start in June and finish in April of 2021. So the entire process would last, what is that, about 10 months.
But it sounds like, a big part of the back and forth here is similar to what happened with the CBRE phase 1 projects, right? That you guys are coming to them with costs for interconnection, and they're saying, and equipment and everything, and they're saying, how can this be? What's going on? And so there's a big, that stretches out, what it sounds like it could be a perhaps more routine. And what I heard from on the CBRE side was that, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to dictate to the developers that this is what the equipment is going to be. These are the kinds of communications that are allowed, to cut out that 2 month back and forth. But then we're sort of stuck with the high costs, right? And so I mean, I think we should talk about the model validation and all that too, but I'm just curious, like, how is this, one of the big mitigations here, or innovations perhaps, is this LMI pilot proposal where the company would have ratepayers pay for all the interconnection costs. So I don't understand how are we going to have lower costs and reduced timeline if we're telling the developers that this is what it's going to be, and you don't have any choice in the matter, and you don't get to talk about it, or the alternative is that we just take it all off of the plate of the developers and we just have the ratepayers pay for everything.
So address a couple points that you made, Dave. So yes, there definitely was back and forth between the company and the developers on the final costs and the interconnection requirements. Not with every project, with some of the projects. But that is not by any means the largest extent of the time. As I mentioned, once we got to certain parts of these studies being near completion or actually complete, developers also made changes to their projects, which required us to relook at things, in some cases, having to redo work. So that's not disagreement with the developer, that's just needing to go back and make changes. And in many cases, those changes were positive benefits for the community or positive benefits for the grid. But that's just the process of project development and ensuring that we're building the best projects, the most reliable projects possible. So yes, there is some time that was, took a little bit longer. I think I noted it took about 2 months longer in that back and forth with developers than expected. So that's maybe the 2 month portion that we would, that I think would be attributable to that back and forth in the whole process of how long this timeline took and what caused delays. In our proposed process for the LMI, we believe that will bring a lot of benefits. One, by doing that, we may be able to identify interconnection locations in advance and provide more detailed information to developers regarding the requirements for interconnection, which would help developers at the RFP stage know what the costs and interconnection requirements are more clearly. In stage 2, we put more cost information into the RFP. We more specifically laid out what our interconnection requirements are. We also made available via confidentiality agreements our technical specifications for interconnection, so that developers were more aware of the requirements when bidding into the RFP process. So we're hoping that will cut down on that 2 months back and forth in stage 2. And we recognize that these are really large projects. The LMI, the other benefit of the proposal, the pilot project we've proposed is when there are instances of multiple projects, which we won't know until an RFP is complete, that want to interconnect in the same area, it will allow the company to consolidate those projects. It will cut down on needing to coordinate with multiple different developers if the company can just move forward and coordinate that on their own and consolidate those, which will reduce footprint, which will reduce costs, which will reduce time to build multiple different points of interconnection. So that's another huge benefit of the process that we're proposing under the LMI pilot.
Okay, thanks, Becca. Chair, I'll hold off on any further questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Commissioner Asuncion?
I don't have any questions on this topic, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Potter?
Thank you, Chair. I also do not have any questions on topic 2. Thank you.
Okay. I have a few questions here, and I'll start with question 1. Dave started. I just want to differentiate from what I see here in the slide, what I heard in the beginning. Right, there was a lot of discussion about the impact of COVID, but if I look at the top part of this slide, the 10 extra months it took for the model was long before any, we're talking about last year. And so I could maybe see the part of that when, and then what's after January 2020 is blank. So seems like a lot of the time here was taken up long before we entered into this emergency environment. So can you just comment on that, please?
Sure. As I noted in the introduction, while we noted that COVID has changed the environment and since March has definitely impacted how we work every day, we're not here to use COVID as an excuse for any of the delays. So, we wanted to address that going forward. There may be concerns about how COVID would impact, and so we were addressing that. Moving forward, we're committed to working with the developers to make sure the projects progress. But I very clearly stated that we were not going to state COVID today as an excuse for any delays that we have experienced to date.
Okay. Greg, can we advance to slide 12, please? And these are the, yeah. Okay, and I think it was Mark Asano who presented this. And what I heard reiterated, and it was in the written responses, the companies expect the delays in the phase 1 project expect no impact on the ability to retire AES. But if I look at the box in the bottom corner, and what I heard Mark reiterate in the discussion is that, or what I interpret from this is that's all contingent on the most recent Kapolei energy storage projects getting in on time. So first off, what if that doesn't happen? Do all of the conclusions on here still hold? If that's delayed, what's the impact with the other delays? So if all projects are delayed past 2022, what are we facing?
Hi, Chair. Thanks for the question. So in terms of the Kapolei energy storage project, first, I wanted to, reemphasize that, at this time, we don't anticipate any delays for that project. And we, expect it to come in to commercial operations prior to AES.
I didn't ask what you expect. I asked what if it happens.
So if that
I look at what's already preceded us, every project in the past few years has been delayed. So from our standpoint, how can we feel assured that this will be the one that stands above the rest? So I want to know what happens if it doesn't come in on time, and if the other projects continue to be delayed, what will we be facing?
So if the Kapolei energy storage project is delayed, what that will mean is that we'll have tighter margins in terms of the capacity and the the ability to serve the peak load. Of course, it depends on how much delayed that project will be in terms of what our risk will be. Because we do typically plan the system, to be able to handle, typical maintenance outages and even unforced or unplanned outages. So, say for example, if Kapolei energy storage was delayed to the end of the year, there would be some increased risk, but we may potentially be okay. I think we would need to take a closer look because we can manage some of those things by looking at our maintenance schedules. Of course, there'd be greater risk, the more that those projects get delayed, especially if it could coincide with, say, higher summer peaks.
Okay, so when we started this, and I think what I wrote down, what was stated is that companies currently do not anticipate any reliability impacts. I mean, we've seen that 7 of these phase 1 projects are all delayed for a year through the interconnection process. And so you want to tell me today that the largest storage project that companies contemplated that you've never done before, we should just assume will go on time? And I mean, what you told me was that you can expect tighter margins, but if it's a year, can you guarantee us what you said in the beginning? There's no reliability impact.
So a couple of things with Kapolei energy storage project that I think is different than the stage 1 projects. So one, it's a standalone battery energy storage project. The point of interconnection is also to one of our existing substations. So there's not that other construction risk of building a whole new switching station. I can say that we've started to receive some of the initial results from the system impact study as well. So we're hopeful and looks promising on that end. Can
you guarantee us it'll be done on time?
I don't think we can guarantee that because.
Okay, so based on that, if it's not done on time, the implications of the delays in the phase one projects would appear to be more serious. I mean, what I feel like is that you're forcing us to put all of our eggs in. This is the one egg when we have lots of other projects that are going to help. And so why aren't we trying to push all of them and give ourselves the best margin of comfort?
Yeah, so I mean, the company will continue to evaluate any of the contingency plans needed, should the Kapolei energy storage project be delayed.
And is one of those contingencies to bring other projects online faster?
So I think in terms of the other projects, we are currently doing everything we can to help get those projects on time or get those projects in as quickly as possible.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So let's, can we move to the next slide, number 13? Okay, so it says here the benefits are delayed but not lost. In present value terms, if it's delayed, are the benefits diminished?
Not necessarily. As we mentioned, there was trade-offs for the benefits that were received. In some cases, right, the delays resulted from the developers deciding to rearrange or redesign the footprint of their projects, which made the communities much more receptive to those projects, which in the long run will likely result in less delays and more success of the project. So we were looking at, whether these delays in the interconnection process overall still result in a more successful and the ability to receive the total amount of benefits versus losing the projects altogether or having maybe greater delays than what we're seeing today. So there's a trade-off for those benefits. In some cases, the benefits that we may see on the back end may be larger. It's hard to quantify those, but I don't think that it's a blanket statement that you can say that that the delays are going to result in a significant or more substantial loss, because maybe the other option would have been to lose the project altogether.
So no, I'm glad you brought that up, Rebecca. I think what I heard was in certain projects, there was feedback and the company worked with the developer to revise things and either will help the phase. I mean, the whole Ana case, it'll help phase two projects potentially. Kuihilani may help with community acceptance. So, okay, those are, but I believe all projects in phase one have been delayed. So I can understand how in individual cases that helps, but what we've seen is across the board. So you're saying in every case, each one of those delays is going to bring greater benefits to everyone in the long term?
No, I didn't say in every case. I said in some of the cases.
But what we've seen is delay in every case.
Right, and some of those other delays have allowed us to better understand the projects, ensure that the systems, some of them have required mitigation. So since, making sure we had the proper models, the studies completed in time has allowed us to ensure that we're going to be designing and having projects built for the system that will allow us to continue a safe and reliable operation, which is really important. Our number one job is still to keep the lights on and maintain our system. So we want to make sure that any new project we add is done reliably and safely, and that we're not cutting any corners just for the sake of speed, but making sure that the projects are successful and will provide the maximum benefits to our customers for their entire term.
And just to add real quickly, I mean, the PPA term remains the same. So, we would expect any delay, there would still be benefit on the back end. And I think, there may have been, I'd have to go back and check the the bill impacts. But, you know, I do think there are, you know, there may be greater benefits on the back end.
I think in every one of these projects, it was near term. And if you look at something discounted over 20 years or 25 years, the back end is very marginal. I just want to highlight one other area that one we didn't ask about, but it wasn't included in your discussion of the impacts here. But we did talk about COVID, and the commission and companies have talked about these projects all being a key part of recovery. Companies put out a press release, I believe it was July 1st, touting all the projects, their economic development benefits. We see a delay of 1 year, we're going to miss a critical part of that recovery. So first off, in issuing that press release, given the timelines you've offered us, it would appear that the companies knew that these were going to be delayed already. And two, what sort of, how is that factored into the discussions here? Whether, having these projects contribute to the state's economic recovery?
The projects are still, moving forward. They're still going through engineering design. There's still been local contractors hired to work on these projects, in engineering firms, firms that are handling, environmental studies, cultural impact studies, community outreach consultants. So these projects, while delayed, are still contributing to jobs, moving forward, creating economic benefits in the state. So those jobs are still being created, are still being realized, even with delays to the ultimate guaranteed commercial operation phase.
The construction process is a really significant part of that, and aren't we really pushing that off into 2022?
The construction part has been, delayed, but I don't think it was misleading of the company to say that these projects will help with economic recovery. I can't say the exact date that the construction is anticipated to start for these projects. I think some will start in 2021. I don't have those dates right in front of me.
But in the discussion of managing the overall timeline of bringing these projects online, does that, when it's brought forward that we're going to amend the PPA to delay the GCOD a year, is that part of the discussion? How, are we going to delay the positive economic benefits of these projects to the state? Okay.
I don't think that's as easy to quantify as.
I didn't ask to quantify it. I just asked if that is part of the discussion.
Yes, we obviously look at all of the impacts that may be caused by delays, and we look at the trade-offs associated with those.
Okay. If we can go to slide 14. Okay, so I heard, and this is Mark, a kind of general discussion, but based on what the company's considering, can you give us any sort of firm timeline or benchmark how your efforts to mitigate the delays, what can we count on to speed things up? You have 5 things on the slide here. Can you say, that's going to help by 2 months, 6 months? How are we going to gain time back here?
So in terms of quantification, like I was mentioning earlier, we have seen an improvement in the model and checkout validation process. We've started to review some preliminary results of the system impact study. I think one thing that would really help, and I don't know if we can quantify it yet, but we did start preliminary facility study with the and the intention there is that the IRS or the system impact study wouldn't significantly change the facilities, and therefore we can get a head start on that. Obviously, there's going to be other work that will need to be incorporated into the facility study once we finalize the system impact study. However, to the extent possible, that should help get to the point where we can start working on the IRS amendments sooner than later. I think the improvements we've already made to the model process have shown to work to some extent. Of course, as I noted, we are now working with grid forming inverters, and as part of the IRS, we are looking at how the grid forming inverters will work with the entire system. So those studies, may take a little longer, but we hope that we can at least nail down the facilities, in a shorter timeline than we did in stage one.
Okay, so from that response, do I take that most of the impact here are improvements that will be incorporated into stage two? But the real focus of my question is, how do we gain back time on stage one?
For stage one, for some of the developers, they've agreed to early engineering. So we've entered into agreements with those developers to begin engineering a little bit earlier than we normally would, to try to speed up that process and move those projects along. The majority, I think almost all developers, have agreed to developer build, which allows for more resources to be put towards building the interconnection facilities versus the company being doing all of those at one time. And we've also instituted biweekly meetings with all of the developers to make sure that we're all on the same page, we're all moving towards the same deadlines, we're providing each other updated schedules of our progress.
Okay, that's helpful. Can you give us any sort of estimate how much that's going to help?
I don't have that information with me. No, I'm sorry. We can get back to you.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That's all I have for topic 2. So want to move to topic 3, and Dave, you're up again.
I don't have any questions for this topic, Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Sunsian?
Yeah, I just had one question, and I guess it's really to the extent that HECO you guys can answer, but we talked about the Maui project that is voluntarily withdrawn from the negotiations, and they're trying to sell the project. Is there a timeline that we expect? Right, I mean, we're trying to find a buyer, and what you guys, like, the cleanest way I understand, right, that they agree to all the terms and conditions and whatnot that's already technically agreed upon, right, as part of the award. But is there like a timeline, or is that totally up to, right, the applicant that has withdrawn to do, and then let you guys know? Because I would think that it's going to affect, right, when we expect that project to come online and things like that, if they do end up selling.
We don't have a set timeline with the developer. My understanding is that the developer is attempting to move quickly. As I mentioned, we're not involved in their discussions regarding the sale of the project. So we don't have an exact timeline, but we have recognized the importance of trying to get a decision from the developer as quickly as possible. And we are in regular, almost daily communications with the developer, asking them for status updates and discussing the process.
Okay. And I guess likewise for the Hawaii Island project, is there any type of timeline that, or when you guys are gonna determine if a replacement is needed for that one that withdrew?
Yeah, so actually, as I mentioned in the presentation, our preference is to select an alternative project. So we've met with the independent observer regarding the analysis of the remaining projects on our priority list. We expect to get back to the independent observer with some follow-up information, hopefully within the next week, and then be able to move forward quickly after that.
Okay. Chair, that's all I have for this topic.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Potter?
Hi, yes, Rebecca, I have just one question for you. In regards to the project on Maui that the developer is attempting to sell, do they have is there any incentive or is there any reason why they would be compelled to actually sell their project? Is there some negotiation, something between you all, or is this just good faith?
Yeah, there, not to my knowledge, there's nothing between the two of us. I mean, I can speculate the developer, if they had decided not to move forward, may want to try to recover some of their costs for development to date, and so therefore may, have an incentive of their own to want to sell the project to recover costs. But we haven't discussed that with the developer, and there's no incentive from us or, in the RFP process for that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. I was just like, how likely is it, that they would actually sell the project and move on that quickly, so thank you, that helps. Because you don't know the answer to that question either, but we'll speculate. Thanks. Chair, your turn.
Okay, yeah, I just had a quick follow-up, and just if, Rebecca, if Hawaiian Electric's aware of any industry benchmark or rule of thumb on how long those sales take, should we expect quick, 6 months, 12 months? Like, what, do you have a sense of the industry norm here?
I don't have an average, but my understanding in talking with the developer is, once they were to identify a potential purchaser, it seems like the process could move relatively quickly. I don't think it would take 6 months to a year. I think it would be shorter than that. We can follow up with that developer.
Okay, that's all questions I have on this topic. If we turn to the last one, topic 4. Dave, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to hone in on this one point here about the process with the independent observer. Can you describe what changes you've made there specifically?
Sure. So the refined process with the independent observer, so typically any third party or even the self-build team, if they have a question for the utility, they send that to the company to the RFP team through our RFP email box specific for that island's RFP. And then once the company responds to that question, then we copy the independent observer on that outgoing email. So they see the original email that came in either from the self-build team or an independent third-party developer that had questions, and then our response. The process that we've added moving forward is that when the self-build team emails that email inbox, that they now will also copy the independent observer on their original email. So they'll have an additional step that third-party developers wouldn't have to take. Okay, and so was that process, or sorry, the existing code of conduct requires the independent observer to be included in communications with developers. Was that process followed in this case? I understand you've added a new aspect to the process for the self-build team, but I'm interested in for the RFP team. Yeah, so I don't have the exact code of conduct language. I think the independent observer is definitely allowed to have those communications between the two teams, and they're supposed to follow the communication protocol. In the two instances that I discussed, the independent observer wasn't copied on those communications originally, and obviously they weren't through the proper communication protocol, as I noted, but we did notify the independent observer of those communications after the fact when the RFP team was made aware, and we did provide copies of those communications to the independent observer at that time.
Okay. And then are you or you know is anyone aware of any issues in terms of breaches or violations of the code of conduct for any of the stage 1 or stage 2 RFP processes?
No, I'm not aware of any. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any such communication breaches.
Okay. That's all the questions I had, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. Commissioner Asuncion?
I have no questions, but rather just a comment. I think, you know, any type of breaches, I think you guys have gotten the message. It's a serious matter. So I think moving forward, you know, I hear what you guys are saying, things that have been changed. Hopefully we won't run into any more of these breaches within the internal company.
Okay, Commissioner Potter?
Thank you, Chair. I do not have any questions on this topic. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple of follow-ups, and it really follows on what Dave and Commissioner Asuncion said. But the slide here says no harm. And to Commissioner Asuncion's point, seems like trust in our process is essential to the competition here. And so any of these breaches that chip away at that trust seem to cause a harm. So when Hawaiian Electric says there's no harm, I mean, are you considering that, or what? I mean, what's your basis for statement of no harm?
No, understandable. 100% agree with you that, you know, even though, you know, I think the communications that were done were with the intent to actually provide third-party bidders more detailed information to be able to make sure that they fully, robustly understood what was available, provided them more detailed interconnection requirements to address some of the issues we've seen in stage 1 and in the CBRE phase 1 projects. It does, like you said, erode trust. So when we were referencing here no harm, and in my talk, it was that you know, the third parties weren't put at a disadvantage in the competitive bidding process. But I understand your point, Chair, and it's well taken.
Okay, and I just want to kind of ask Dave's question a little more broadly and confirm, are you aware of any other breakdowns of the code of conduct, period? Beyond this, beyond other RFP, period? Any confirm for us, please, you're aware there's no other breakdowns that Hawaiian Electric is aware of at this point?
Not that I'm aware of at this point, no.
Okay. With that concludes my questions. I want to thank the team here. We ran a little bit over, but we kept largely within the 2 hours. Thanks to Hawaiian Electric for their preparation. The commission will take all this information under advisement and consider some of the options here. I think you've heard a lot from us. I can say for me, I've heard a lot about the problems and the causes of delays. I haven't heard a lot about what we're going to do about it and how we're going to make up time. So I think the more we can focus our efforts on that, I think it'll be in everyone's interest. And look forward to working together on all these projects to make them as successful as we can be. So with that, we're going to conclude our status conference today. I want to thank our staff. I want to thank my fellow commissioners and all of you out there watching, and the Hawaiian Electric team made yourself available to us. With that, we're going to conclude and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.